What if the High Septon's own diary was read aloud at Ned Stark's trial? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. The sun sits high over King's Landing, bright and indifferent, and the small folk of the city have turned out by the thousands to fill the plaza below the great sept of Baelor. They pack the steps and the streets and the edges of the square. They have climbed onto carts and window ledges to see. They came to watch a traitor confess, and the morning is perfect for it. The crystal dome of the sept, catching the light and throwing it down across the crowd in shards. Guards bring Eddard Stark up from the black cells and onto the steps. He comes up looking like a man who has lived underground for weeks, because he has. He is lean by nature, and now he is lean in a harder way, the face drawn tight above the beard. He never trimmed, his dark hair hangs loose. Chains bind his wrists, and he carries them as a man carries any burden he has decided to accept. He is 36 years old. He looks 10 years older than that today. The King's Guard walk him to the platform at the top of the steps and set him facing the crowd. He does not look at them. He looks straight ahead. Joffrey Baratheon sits in a raised chair at the center of the platform, golden-haired and green-eyed, dressed in crimson and gold. He is 13 years old, and he knows very well what's sitting in that chair. His mother, Cersei Lannister, stands at his right hand, her golden hair coiled perfectly, her green eyes doing the real work of watching the crowd. She is 33 years old, and she has arranged every detail of this morning, and she intends for it to go a certain way. Petyr Baelish stands behind the royal pair, with his hands folded and his pointed beard trimmed neatly, his small smile belonging to no one. Varys stands a little apart, round and pale and draped in fine robes, watching the crowd instead of the prisoner. Grand Maester Pycelle holds a place near the platform's edge, his long white beard stirring in the light wind. He is close to 82 years old, and today he wants no one to notice him. Sansa Stark stands on the platform. She is 13, auburn-haired and straight-backed, watching her father with the careful, controlled look of a girl who has promised herself she will not break. She has held that promise for weeks. Down in the crowd, at the wide base of the great stone statue of Baelor the Blessed, a girl named Arya Stark stands and does not move. She is 10 years old and small, dark-haired and dressed plainly, and she has worked her way through the press of bodies since before the platform filled to find a line of sight to her father's face. She has it now. She does not blink. Nearby in the crowd, a Night's Watch recruiter named Yoren watches the same platform and keeps his thoughts to himself. The High Septon steps forward to open the proceedings. He is a squat, ponderously fat man with grey hair beneath the crystals and silk of his office. He has led the faith through wars and royal funerals and years of court politics by blessing whoever held power and asking nothing that might make them uncomfortable. He opens the proceedings in his rolling, self-important way, the words practiced, the voice carrying out over the plaza without effort, the crowd going quiet for the office if not the man. Ned Stark draws a slow breath. He has agreed to the terms. He confesses. He takes the black. He goes to the wall. His daughters stay safe. He does not want to say these words. He will say them anyway because he is a man who keeps his promises. Hus? He opens his mouth to begin. The High Septon raises one fat hand. The crowd does not understand what they are seeing. Ser Eileen Payne stands at the edge of the platform, hollow-faced. Joffrey's head turns. Cersei's eyes go still and sharp. The High Septon speaks. His voice is the same rolling instrument it always is, slow and certain of its own importance, but something underneath the words reaches the crowd even from a distance. Someone made him a promise, he says. The man standing in chains on these sacred steps was going to receive mercy. That was the agreement, and the agreement took place in the sight of the seven, and he has it recorded. And before the faith of the seven gives any blessing to proceedings on holy ground, the record of that promise must come before the gods and the people assembled here. He pauses and lets the plaza absorb that. No one sheds blood near the great sept of Baelor. He says this not as a reminder today, but as a condition. For a moment, nobody on the platform moves. Joffrey looks at his mother. The look asks a question she does not answer out loud. Cersei looks at the crowd, then at the High Septon, then at the crowd again. She counts what she sees. Thousands of witnesses, most of them already hostile, and a fat Septon standing on holy ground with the faith's authority behind him. The cost of pushing through anyway is too high. She lays a hand on Joffrey's arm and speaks close to his ear. He does not look pleased. He stays in his chair. The High Septon turns toward the great doors of the sept behind him and raises his voice. He asks for a junior Septon to bring 2 documents from the faith's vault. His own diary, which has been in his chambers since before the arrangement for this proceeding began, and a second volume, older and bound in the faith's own style, the personal journal of the High Septon who served during Robert's rebellion, the man they called Maynard. The crowd stirs. Most of them do not know that name, but they can hear something in the way the fat Septon says it, something that does not belong to the normal course of a confession. Ned Stark hears the name Maynard, and his hands close around the chain between his wrists. His face does not change. Something behind his eyes does. Something that looks like a man realizing that a wall he has held for 16 years is about to come down, and he cannot stop it. The great doors of the great sept open. A young Septon in white robes comes out carrying 2 bound volumes, 1 in each arm. He sets them on a table near the front of the steps and steps back. The plaza below goes quiet. The whole city of King's Landing, which is never quiet, holds its breath. In the shadow of the statue of Baelor the Blessed Arya, Stark stops moving entirely. The junior Septon who carries the voice for formal readings takes his place at the table. He opens the High Septon's diary to a marked page and begins. The entry is dated. It names the parties. Cersei Lannister, Queen Regent of the Seven Kingdoms, appeared before His High Holiness in the small hours before the proceeding and swore before the Seven that Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell, would receive mercy in exchange for his public confession of treason. He would not face the executioner. He would take the black. He would go to the wall and live out his days as a man of the Night's Watch. His daughters would remain safe in King's Landing. The High Septon recorded the date and the hour and the words spoken and the names of those present. His handwriting is neat for a fat man. His records are thorough for a corrupt one. The reading Septon's voice carries over the plaza without effort. He is used to projecting scripture over crowds. He does not pause or stumble. He reads it the way the crowd hears it, plainly, without mercy for anyone named in the text. Cersei Lannister's face drains of color, not of expression. She does not allow herself expression, but the color goes. And standing there beside her son in her gold and crimson, she suddenly looks like a woman who has just found the ground missing under 1 foot. She does not look at Littlefinger. She does not look at Varys. She looks straight ahead at nothing. Petter Baelish, standing behind the royal pair, goes very still. He is a man who measures risk the way other men measure wine, always calculating the pour, never surprised by the quantity. He is surprised now. The small smile stays on his face, because he has worn it so long it does not come off quickly, but behind his eyes the numbers are running, and none of them are adding up the way he planned. Joffrey leans toward his mother. He does not understand why the reading of some Septon's diary requires him to sit in a chair and listen while a crowd watches. He knows what is supposed to happen today, and this is not it. He looks at Cersei and opens his mouth. She puts one hand on his arm without turning to look at him, and the pressure of it closes his mouth again. Grand Maester Pycelle blinks. Then he blinks again. He has a very old man's way of processing terrible news, which is to do it slowly and with his eyes. Varys is not watching the reader at all. He is watching the other faces on the platform, moving from one to the next, patient and thorough as a man taking inventory. When the reading Septon finishes the first document, he sets the High Septon's diary aside and takes up the second volume. This one is older, the binding worn smooth, the pages the color of old teeth. He finds the marked entries and begins again. In the year of Robert's rebellion, he reads, "The High Septon of the Faith of the Seven did issue a formal annulment of the marriage between Rhaegar Targaryen, Crown Prince of the Seven Kingdoms, and Elia Martell of Dorne, in accordance with his authority as head of the faith. And that in the same season the same High Septon did perform and sanctify a secret ceremony of marriage in Dorne between Rhaegar Targaryen, Crown Prince, and Lyanna Stark, daughter of House Stark of Winterfell, in the sight of the Seven." The entry names the date. It names the witnesses. It names the place in Dorne where they stood. Maynard was known for recording every minor detail of his life, and he wrote this entry in the careful hand of a man who understood that he was setting down something the world was not yet ready to know. The reading, Septon pauses for breath. He does not know what he is reading. He is doing his duty. He turns the page and continues. For a moment the plaza is quiet enough to hear the wind. Then a man near the front of the crowd says something to the man beside him. Then a woman says it louder. Then the noise begins to build, not like a cheer, and not like a riot, but like the sound of a very large number of people trying to make sense of the same thing at the same time. The small folk of King's Landing are not schooled in succession law or the history of royal annulments, but they know the name Lyanna Stark. The whole realm knows Lyanna Stark. She is the dead girl the war was fought over, the one Robert Baratheon loved, the one the Dragon Prince stole away and carried south to Dorne. And they look at the man standing in chains on the platform. Lyanna Stark's brother, Ned, hears every word. He has heard words about Lyanna Stark for 16 years, and they have never landed quite this way, out in the open air in front of thousands of people, in someone else's voice read from a book he never knew existed. He made her a promise at the end. He kept it with his body and his silence, and at the cost of his honor. He called her son his bastard, and raised the boy and bore the shame of it for 16 years, and no one ever knew the reason because he never gave them one. The promise is out now. He did not choose to break it. He does not speak. He does not confirm or deny anything. He does not need to. He is a man who has been known his entire life for honesty, and the city knows it, and his silence in response to the reading of a High Septon's authenticated journal is a confirmation that does not require a single word to make itself felt. Sansa is watching him. She is 13 years old, and she has heard every word of both readings, and she is looking at her father's face with an expression that wants to understand something and cannot find the shape of it. She knows Aunt Lyanna's name. She does not know what a royal marriage and an annulment and a name in an old journal have to do with her father standing in chains in the morning sun. There is something in it she has never seen before. Ned does not look back at her. He is looking at the 2 bound volumes on the table, at the front of the steps, and at the reading Septon, who has finished and stands quietly with his hands folded. 16 years. He kept a dead woman's secret through a war and a reign, and the long, slow daily labor of pretending to be something he was not. And in the end, it is not a king's command or a maester's letter or a raven in the night that breaks it open. It is a fat man's diary and a careful old man's journal. Read aloud on stone steps in the white morning light of King's Landing, while the city listens and begins, very slowly, to understand what it has heard. The High Septon steps to the front of the platform and raises both hands. He speaks in a voice that carries over the plaza and out into the surrounding streets. He invokes the sanctuary of the great sept of Baelor in the name of the Father and the Mother and all 7. No one sheds blood on or near these steps today. Not on sacred ground. The faith suspends the proceedings. The guards look at Joffrey. Joffrey looks at Cersei. Cersei says nothing. The guards take Eddard Stark by the arms and begin walking him back through the crowd toward the Red Keep. Sir Eileen Payne sheathes the sword at his hip, not Ned's sword, his own. He stands where he has always stood, hollow-faced and patient, waiting for an order that does not come. Ned passes within a few feet of him, and neither man looks at the other. The crowd parts for the guards and the prisoner. The city watches in silence as the man who is supposed to die this morning is walked back into custody, still breathing. It is not a rescue, and it is not a pardon. It is simply a man alive who should not be, and the crowd understands the difference, and the silence it keeps while watching is the silence of people who saw something real and do not yet know what to make of it. On the platform, Joffrey grips the arms of his chair hard enough that the knuckles go pale. He is 13 years old and furious in the particular way of a boy who has been denied something he already decided was his. He was promised an execution. A fat old Septon stood on the most sacred ground in his city and refused him in front of thousands of his own people. He looks at his mother. His face says everything. His voice cannot say here. Cersei lays a hand on his arm. Her fingers press once firmly, and the pressure carries its own instruction. Not here, not now. She keeps her eyes on the crowd below. She has seen crowds turn, and this one is large and strange and watching with the wrong kind of attention, the kind that remembers every detail. She will not give it something else to remember. Across the platform, Sansa Stark watches her father disappear into the press of bodies below the steps. She does not move. She is a Lannister hostage, and she has known it for weeks, and she stands very straight and does not show what is happening behind her eyes. Cersei is already thinking past the steps. The journal is out. She cannot unread it, and she cannot seize the High Septon on sacred ground without igniting the very riot she is trying to prevent. What she can do is call it forgery. She will say that documents are false, that the faith's vault was compromised, that someone with an interest in Targaryen restoration planted the journal to destabilize the crown. It will not convince everyone. It will convince enough people to buy time, and time is what she needs now more than anything else. The small council convenes in the Red Keep within the hour. Cersei sits at the head of the table and states the strategy plainly. The journal is a forgery. Grand Maester Pycelle will produce a formal citadel challenge to its authenticity. She looks at Pycelle while she says this. Pycelle is close to 82 years old, and he has served the Lannisters for most of his long life. He knows what is in that journal. He has always known the truth of Joffrey's parentage, and he buried it the way he buries everything dangerous, under layers of deference and institutional weight and the quiet comfort of never asking questions that could not be answered safely. He looks at Cersei and nods. He will write the formal challenge. He reaches for his quill with a hand that does not shake, because Grand Maesters do not let their hands shake where anyone can see them. But even as he writes, he understands the difficulty. A sitting high Septon's authenticated record is not a rumor in a tavern or a letter from a resentful lord. It is a faith document produced from a faith vault and certified by the highest religious authority in Westeros. The Citadel can challenge anything, but a challenge that calls the High Septon a liar on a matter of his own record is a challenge the most devout will not accept quietly. And Pycelle knows it, and he writes his challenge anyway, because that is what Lannisters ask and what he does. Varys sits in his chair at the council table and says very little. He listens. He watches Pycelle reach for his quill and watches Cersei's face while she waits for the nod. He did not know, before the reading on the Sept steps, what Maynard's journal contained. The secret stayed sealed in the Faith's vault for more than 16 years, and it came out not through any whisper network or agent of his, but through a fat Septon's wounded pride on consecrated ground. He does not move to help the challenge Pycelle is writing. He does not move to amplify what the journal revealed. He waits. Whatever comes next will arrive from many directions at once, and a man who serves the realm does better by watching where all the pieces land than by reaching for any of them too soon. He is very good at waiting. Petyr Baelish excuses himself from the small council before the session ends. He walks through the corridors of the Red Keep, with his hands clasped behind him and his face set in its usual expression of mild, private amusement. He is thinking hard. The chaos he has cultivated over the past year, the Stark-Lannister collision he fed and shaped and profited from, has just been swallowed by something larger than anything he planned for. A legitimate Targaryen claim, backed by the Faith's own records, is not a dispute between two noble houses. It is a question that touches every throne in Westeros and gives religious cover to anyone who wants to contest the crown. He cannot manage this. He does not own any piece of it. He needs an angle that is smaller and closer and does not require him to control something he cannot control. He does not have one yet. He will find one. He always does. But this one will take longer than most. Meanwhile, out in the streets of King's Landing, the word spreads. It moves from the plaza to the ale sellers to the dock workers and the market stalls, changing shape as it goes, but keeping its center. Ned Stark is not dead. Something happened on the steps of the great Sept of Baelor, something to do with old documents and a dead woman and a marriage that nobody knew about. The small folk cannot fully explain what it means, and most of them do not try. It is the kind of story that travels, not because people understand it, but because they feel it. Something large moved today on the steps of the Sept, and the city feels the weight of it even at a distance. King's Landing has been short of food for weeks, and the hunger makes people restless and quick to anger. And now there is something else moving through the streets, alongside the hunger, something nameless and fast and very hard to put back in a box once it is out. Ned Stark sits in the black cells again. He is alive. For now, that is the whole of it. The Raven reaches Robb Stark's camp in the Riverlands 3 days after the events on the steps of the great Sept of Baelor. It arrives near dark, when the army has stopped moving for the day, and the fires are being lit across the spread of tents and horses and cold mud that a marching host leaves everywhere it goes. The message is short and broken by the limits of the bird that carried it. Ravens carry what they can and no more. And what this one carries is not the full account. Ned Stark is alive. Proceedings at the Great Sept were suspended by the High Septon. Documents were read aloud on the steps before the city. There was a question raised about a Targaryen marriage from the time of Robert's rebellion. Joffrey did not execute Ned Stark. Robb Stark reads the message by firelight, reading it twice, then a third time, as if the words will rearrange themselves into something clearer on the third pass. He is 16 years old and leading an army of 20,000 men south toward a war he began, because his father was taken and might die. He hands the message to Catelyn without speaking. Catelyn, Stark reads it faster. She is 35 years old, auburn-haired and clear-eyed, a lord's daughter, and now the closest thing Robb has to a political mind in the field. She reads the message once, then again she knows the name Maynard. She has seen it in the Faith's correspondence before, a High Septon from the time of Robert's rebellion, remembered in religious circles as a man who recorded every ceremony he presided over with unusual precision. She reads past Maynard's name to the name that comes next in the fragmented, cramped handwriting of whoever sent this. The name is Lyanna Stark. She does not say it aloud. She holds the message and looks at the fire and thinks. Lyanna, Ned's dead sister, the woman the whole war was supposedly fought over, the one the Dragon Prince took away to Dorne while half the realm burned behind them. And Ned, who came home from that war with a bastard son and never once spoke the mother's name. Not to Catelyn. Not in 16 years of marriage. She has lived with that silence, carried it, resented it in the private parts of herself she does not show. She never understood why, and now she is holding a piece of parchment that mentions a Targaryen prince and a secret wedding and Ned's dead sister's name, and the cold that moves through her is not dread exactly, but it is close enough to it that she needs a moment before she stands. She goes to Tyrion Lannister. They keep him in a tent under guard, not comfortably but not cruelly, because Catelyn is not a cruel woman, and because Tyrion Lannister alive and in her custody is worth considerably more than Tyrion Lannister dead. He is sitting on a camp stool when she comes through the tent flap, a dwarf with mismatched eyes, one green and one black, and half the golden hair his sister was given, and none of the height. He watches her cross the tent with the focused attention of a man who has learned to read rooms quickly, because his life has frequently depended on it. She does not give him the message. She reads one line aloud from it, watching his face. The journal of the High Septon records that Rhaegar Targaryen annulled his marriage to Elia Martell of Dorne, and wed a Stark woman in secret in Dorne. It is not the stillness of a man who has stopped thinking. It is the stillness of a man thinking very fast and very carefully. He looks at Catelyn's face, and she looks at his, and neither of them speaks. Then something moves through his mismatched eyes, a slow and careful interest, the kind that is dangerous because it is not panic. A man in his position who could not think clearly would panic. Tyrion Lannister calculates. He is a Lannister. He understands what the journal means. His sister's claim to the regency rests on Joffrey carrying Robert Baratheon's blood, and that claim rests on a lie. And now, the lie has a rival document with the Faith's own authentication behind it. The annulment and the secret marriage do not just complicate Joffrey's seat. They produce a Targaryen heir with a stronger claim than any of the Baratheon children. The boy at the wall, he says. Catelyn says nothing. But she does not deny it. With that, she returns to Robb's tent and finds him already with his war council. The lords around the table are men who came south for a straightforward war of vengeance and honor, and they have opinions about a revelation that is neither of those things. Most of those opinions loud. Rob listens to all of it with the quiet of a commander who has learned that the most useful voice in any room is rarely the loudest one. His father is alive. That changes the shape of everything. The march south built its fury on the expectation that Ned was dead or would be soon, and rage at a father's murder burns differently from the cold calculation of a living father in a cell who can still be leveraged. He could push south while the Lannisters are off balance from the journal reading and force a settlement before they recover. Or he could hold his position and wait to see what King's Landing does next before he commits to a move he cannot take back. Catelyn speaks last. They do not yet know what King's Landing will do, she says. A man who moves before he knows his ground is a man who falls. Hold. Wait for the second raven. The second raven from Winterfell arrives before dawn. It is short. The younger children are safe at Winterfell. The household is intact. No threat to the castle. No word from Jon Snow at the wall. Robb holds both messages in the quiet dark of his tent after the council has gone. His father is alive. The war he rode south to fight has not ended, but it has changed shape under his feet. The way ground shifts along a riverbank when the river rises, familiar on the surface and different beneath. He is 16 years old, and the army outside his tent belongs to him, and the question he cannot yet answer is what kind of war it is now, and what he is supposed to do with it. He keeps the messages. He does not sleep for a long time. Cersei Lannister sits alone in her solar in the Tower of the Hand and works through everything she cannot do. She cannot go to the Great Sept and take the High Septon by the arm. The ground between her and him is consecrated, and any action she takes there now will have 10,000 witnesses who were watching yesterday and have not forgotten what they saw. She cannot have him arrested quietly, not while the city is still moving from what he read aloud on those steps. She cannot reach him at all without the act of reaching becoming its own disaster, another image for the city to carry home and repeat at its tables. She cannot publicly deny the journal without the journal's own authenticator standing on his steps and calling her a liar in front of every pilgrim and merchant and curious small folk who happens to be walking past. She raised that angle in the small council yesterday and watched Pycelle reach for his quill with the enthusiasm of a man who has decided that writing things is less painful than understanding them. What Pycelle produces will hold in a records chamber. It will not hold in the streets, where people are not in the habit of consulting administrative documents before deciding what they believe. She has one instrument available that does not require her to appear on holy ground or debate the authenticity of a dead man's handwriting in public. She has the Citadel's voice at court, and the Citadel's voice belongs to Pycelle. She sends for him. He comes from the corridor bent at the waist, which is his way of making himself appear more deferential than his size allows. He is a large man who has spent decades making himself look small around Lannisters. He stands in front of her table with his hands folded and his old eyes blinking, and his hands, which have signed documents that ended men's lives, do not shake. She gives him credit for that much. She does not ask whether the challenge he drafted yesterday is convincing. She tells him to formalize it with the Citadel's seal and have 5 copies prepared by midday, 1 for each of the city's major lords and 1 for the small council's own record. She wants the challenge to appear institutional, the Citadel's authority in dispute with the faiths. Not her word placed against the High Septon's word, something with a paper pedigree that does not carry her personal seal. He nods. He turns to go. She lets him reach the door before she speaks again. He should understand, she says, that if the formal challenge fails to generate the doubt she needs, there will be no second document written in its place. He has one attempt at this, and it needs to matter. He pauses in the doorway with his back to her. He understands. She can see it in the angle of his shoulders, in the way he does not turn around to acknowledge the instruction. He has spent 30 years understanding every threat she has ever delivered to him, while pretending that no threat was delivered at all. Now there is no pretending left, and they both know it. He leaves. She waits. Littlefinger arrives. An hour later, he has spent the morning moving through the docks and the markets, and 2 or 3 guild halls where men talk freely when they think no one of consequence is present. He stands across the table from her, and gives his assessment with the air of a man reporting facts rather than opinions, which is the kind of thing he does when the facts happen to serve him. He cannot suppress what was said on those steps. He can shape conversations in individual halls and manage what specific lords receive in letters, and apply targeted pressure to anyone whose silence he can purchase or coerce. But the words were spoken in the open air of the great sept of Baelor, before the largest crowd King's Landing has assembled in years. A whisper can be walked back. Words read aloud before 10,000 people who then walked home to 10,000 households and told the story to every person they know cannot be made quiet again. The news is already out of the city. It reached the docks before the sun moved a quarter turn. Cersei says nothing. The silence that follows is not empty. She asks him what he recommends. He takes a moment. Acknowledge nothing. He says, do not accept the journal's contents as real. Do not debate them. Do not let anyone with her authority respond to its specific claims. Attack the Starks. Ned Stark is a condemned traitor who coordinated this intervention through agents he placed within the sept, a desperate man who reached for any instrument that might save himself. Discredit the man, not the document, and give Ned a visible way out that frames him as the architect of the crisis rather than its victim, a distinction she controls more than she thinks if she moves quickly. Let him confess. Let him go to the wall. Let him swear vows and disappear into the far north, where he becomes a distant story told by travelers, rather than a body in the streets of her city that lords can point at. She sits with this. She does not agree out loud or disagree out loud, which is itself a kind of answer. Then she asks about Jaime. Littlefinger offers nothing useful there. Jaime is in the Riverlands. A prisoner in a camp, she cannot reach faster than a raven flies, and ravens carry fragments. She dictates a letter standing up, her back to the window, and passes it to a page without looking at the seal on the wax. She does not know if it will reach him before Robb Stark acts on what he has now been told. She does not know if he has already heard some partial account of it from his own guards. She is fighting this without him, and fighting without him is something she has done before, but not when this much was at stake, and not when she was this close to losing ground she cannot reclaim. In the vaults beneath the great sept of Baelor, the high Septon sits alone at his writing table with his diary open in front of him. He is not a brave man. He has held his position for years through compromise and an almost physical sensitivity to which direction power is blowing at any given moment. He knows what is coming. He saw it in Cersei Lannister's face on the steps, when the color left it, the way color leaves a sail when the wind changes direction suddenly and completely. He has given Eddard Stark a day, perhaps 2. He is not sure he understood, when he raised his hand, what exactly he was beginning. He is still frightened. He is still a fat, pompous man who has spent decades blessing whatever served the powerful and asking no uncomfortable questions. He is also, for the first time in 30 years of religious office, holding something he has never held before, a record that belongs entirely to him, authenticated in his name, that carries the weight of the faith's authority and that no secular power can take from him. He opens his diary to a fresh page. He sets his pen to it. He begins to write. The wall is not something you get used to. 700 feet of ancient ice, older than any kingdom standing, older than most kingdoms anyone can name. The men who raised it are stories now, and even the stories are contested. Jon Snow has been at Castle Black for months, and he is still not used to it. It is always in the corner of your vision, pale and blue-white, occupying the northern edge of every yard and courtyard and corridor, with the silent indifference of something very old and very large. It does not care that you are afraid of it. It is there when you go to sleep, and there when you wake up, and there at every moment in between. He took his vows 12 days ago in the Godswood, kneeling on frozen ground, with the cold coming up through his knees, saying the words by the light of a small fire, while the older brothers watched from the shadows. Night gathers, and now my watch begins. It shall not end until my death. He meant the words then. He still means them now. He is 16 years old, and his vows are newer than the bruises on his forearms from training and older than his first completed night patrol. He is the sword in the darkness. He has been assigned to the yard for drills this morning. He does not think about his father every hour, only some hours, which is an improvement over the first weeks when he thought about it every waking moment and could not do anything useful about it. He is running sword drills when the boy comes across the yard for him. Raven from the south, the boy says. The maester says to come. Jon follows him up the worn stairs to the maester's tower. The maester passes him the scroll without reading it aloud, and lets him take it to the window for the light. This is not the first raven Jon has received about his father. They have all been short, and none of them have carried the news he is reading now. He reads the message once, his face, a long face, dark-haired, grey-eyed, the face his father gave him, goes through several things in a short time. His father is alive. The proceedings at the great sept of Baelor were stopped before the execution took place. The High Septon himself invoked the sanctuary of the sept and called for records to be read. And then the third thing, which takes him 2 readings to absorb, that documents were read aloud on the steps, old documents from the faith's own vault, the journal of the High Septon who served during Robert's Rebellion, an annulment, a secret marriage, Rhaegar Targaryen, Lyanna Stark. Jon lifts his eyes from the scroll. He looks at the wall through the tower window, the wall which is always there, and then he looks back at the message. He knows the name Lyanna Stark. He has always known it. She is his father's dead sister. The woman, the whole war was supposedly about the one the dragon prince took to Dorne while kingdoms burned around them. His father does not speak of Lyanna, the way he speaks of other lost things. He speaks of her in the short way of a man who has decided that some grief is not for sharing, and some silences are kept, because breaking them would cost more than they are worth. She died at the end of the war in a tower somewhere in Dorne. Jon knows this. He has always known this. He does not know, and has never known, anything more than this. He reads the message a 4th time. A secret marriage. Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark wed in Dorne by the High Septon himself, with the annulment of the prince's first marriage recorded in the same document by the same authority. John goes through this information the way you go through a lock you cannot open, carefully from different angles, looking for the mechanism. He does not find one. He does not know what a Targaryen prince's secret marriage from 17 years ago has to do with his father's trial. He does not know why the High Septon stopped the proceedings to read it aloud. He does not know why the name Lyanna Stark appears in a political document alongside a crown prince's name and the records of an annulment. His father is a Stark. He is a Stark, or as close to one as the bastard son of a Stark can be. Lyanna Stark was his father's sister, and she is dead. And what the Dragon Prince did with her in Dawn is a tragedy from a war he was not alive to see. He folds the message. He holds it. He looks at nothing in particular. He thinks of his vows. I shall take no wife, hold no lands, father no children. I shall wear no crowns, and win no glory. I shall live and die at my post. He said these words in the Godswood 12 days ago, in the cold and the dark, and he said them with the weight of choosing something permanent. His life before Castle Black, the life of a lord's bastard with no name and no future, and a place at a table that was only ever grudging tolerance, is behind him. He chose this, or he accepted this choice, which is near enough to choosing. He is the sword in the darkness. He is the watcher on the walls. He is the fire that burns against cold, the horn that wakes the sleepers, the shield that guards the realms of men. He cannot go south. His vows do not permit it, and he does not want to be a man who hunts the angle at which a vow can be read, to allow what he wants. His father is alive. The execution did not happen. He borrows pen and parchment from the maester's table, and writes back in the way that raven messages require, short and direct. Is his father truly safe, or only given a day's reprieve? What are the terms? He does not write the thing he cannot write. He seals the reply and leaves it with the maester, and goes back down the stairs. He picks up the training sword. He goes back to the drills. Castle Black continues its work. The watch is undermanned, and it has been undermanned 4 years, and the cold beyond the wall is not moved by that fact or any other. John drills until the light goes and eats in the hall with the other brothers and sleeps in his bunk in the barracks while the wall holds the dark at bay 700 feet to the north. He does not know that in a vault, somewhere in a city far to the south, in the careful handwriting of a dead man who recorded everything, a name is written down. The name is not Jon Snow. He sleeps, and the wall stands in the dark, and the sword in the darkness rests, and outside the long night presses against the ice as it always has and always will, patient and cold and without any interest at all in the names that men give themselves. Ned Stark lies on his back in the black cells and stares at the ceiling and counts what he knows for certain. He knows he is alive. He knows the steps of the great sept did not become the last thing he stood on. He knows a journal was read aloud in the open air of King's Landing while thousands of people listened, and that the journal contained the words, "He has spent 16 years arranging his life." Not to say he did not say them. A dead man's careful handwriting said them for him before more witnesses than Ned has spoken to in the whole of his life combined. The promise he made to Lyanna as she was dying is broken. He did not break it. That is the distinction he holds in the dark, and he knows it is a distinction that matters to no one outside this cell. The secret is out. 16 years of silence. 16 years of a lie he told with his honor rather than his tongue. A lie that cost him his wife's full trust and his own reputation and the steady private weight of a grief he could share with nobody. and the world knows it now. He lies on his back and breathes, and is alive, and is not sure, in the small hours that follow a day like the one he has just survived, whether being alive is the uncomplicated gift it always seemed from a distance. Varys comes to him before the dawn. Ned is not surprised. Varys came to him in this same cell in the earlier weeks, when Ned was newly arrived and still learning the geography of the dark. He comes the same way he always comes, quietly, carrying a candle, his round, pale face arranged in the expression he wears when he is thinking hard rather than performing. He is plump and bald and draped in fine robes that look out of place in a dungeon, and his soft footsteps make almost no sound on the stone. He sets the candle down on the floor. Between them he sits. He looks at Ned with the careful patience of a man who has several things to say and is deciding which one comes first. What he says first is, the journal cannot be suppressed. Ned has already understood this, he says so. Varys nods. The city heard it, he says. What King's Landing hears this week, the Reach hears next week, and the Westerlands the week after that. A reading from the Faith's own vault, in the voice of a Septon, from the steps of the great Sept of Baelor, with the High Septon standing on the consecrated stone to authenticate it, that is not a whisper that can be walked back. Pycelle will produce a citadel challenge to the journal's authenticity. The challenge will convince those who already wish to be convinced, and no one else. And the list of those who wish to be convinced grows shorter by the hour. He looks at Ned. Then he asks the question, plainly, does the boy know? The boy. 16 years ago, Ned brought home a dark-haired infant from the south and called him his bastard and gave him his name and his house. And that boy grew up at Winterfell calling himself Jon Snow and believed it as naturally as breathing, because Ned had made the lie complete enough. Jon is 16 years old now, and at Castle Black with his vows fresh on him. He has never been told. He has never asked the question that would require the telling, because the question never had any reason to form itself in his mind. No, Ned says, the boy does not know. Varys absorbs this without visible reaction. He says then, every lord who hears the journal's contents will ask the question before the boy does, and the answer will travel faster than the boy's own understanding of it. Ned should know that already. Ned does. He thinks about Robert. For 16 years the shape of the danger was Robert Baratheon. Robert, who loved him like a brother, and who burned with the rage of a man who believed he had been denied something he was owed, who declared every Targaryen dead in his heart before the last of them had fled, who would have killed an infant without hesitation if he had known the infant existed. Ned kept the secret because Robert's love for him was deep and real and would not have survived the truth. And Ned chose the boy over the friendship and kept both the choice and the cost private. A boar caught what Cersei planned for. The specific shape of the old threat is gone. In its place, any lord or claimant who fears the existence of a Targaryen heir with a stronger claim than anyone currently alive and seated or aiming for the Iron Throne. Stannis, who has his own letters out to every lord in the realm. The Lannisters, whose entire regime rests on Joffrey's claim. Anyone who built their position on the assumption that the Targaryen line ended at the Trident. Jon at the Wall, with his vows binding him to the Watch and away from succession and politics, is safer at Castle Black than he would be at any table in any castle, anywhere south of it. This is small comfort. Ned holds it anyway. He lets himself think of the Tower of Joy. He does not do this often. The tower in Dorne, at the end of the war, with the smell of blood and the sound of Lyanna's breathing already thinner than it should have been, already leaving her while she spoke. She was afraid for the child more than for herself. That was Lyanna, afraid for someone else at the worst moment, making him promise to carry what she could no longer carry. He said yes. He took the boy and left the tower carrying a child with dark hair and grey eyes, grey rather than violet, Stark colouring rather than Targaryen, as if the body itself had understood the need for the lie and cooperated. He told the world what the world needed to believe. He believed it would hold. He kept the promise badly. The journal tells him now. He also kept it. Well, the boy is alive and does not know. And in the end, those are the two things the promise asked of him. He is alive, and he grieves. He grieves for Lyanna, who deserved more than a whispered promise in a tower and a secret that survived her by 16 years. He grieves for a boy who grew up as a bastard without a mother's name when he was neither of those things. He grieves for the version of himself who believed that silence was the same as keeping someone safe. He stops grieving because the cell is dark and the city is awake above him and he has work to do. He cannot protect Jon from this cell. He cannot negotiate from this cell. He cannot do anything of use from this cell. And Ned Stark has spent 36 years being a man who does what is useful regardless of what it costs him. He needs to get out of King's Landing. He needs a deal, not the deal that was broken, a new one, built on different ground. The journal is the leverage. The Lannisters cannot afford to have its contents contested while the High Septon is alive to authenticate them, and while the city is already talking, Ned, alive and gone, is manageable. Ned, dead, is a martyr with the faith's own seal on his cause. Get word to Robb, he tells Varys. Tell him to hold. Varys looks at him for a moment in the light of the single candle. Then he picks it up. He leaves the way he came, taking the light with him, and the dark comes back. Ned closes his eyes. He has made his first move. The city is loud tonight. King's Landing is always loud. Carters and dogs and the low, continuous argument of 100,000 people pressed into too small a space, but the noise coming through the thick stone walls of the great sept of Baelor tonight is a different quality of loud. It is the noise of people who saw something and do not know what to do with what they saw. It moves through the streets in a kind of irregular pulse, rising and settling and rising again. The High Septon can hear it from his private chambers near the eastern vaults, even with the shutters drawn and the candles lit. And he has been listening to it for the better part of an hour. He has sent his attendants away. He does not want witnesses to whatever he is about to decide, and he is not yet entirely certain what that will be. He sits at his writing table in his private robe, not the crystals and silk of his office, which he removed when he came in from the steps, and he is a squat, ponderously fat man with grey hair and the very specific awareness of someone whose position has just become considerably more dangerous than it was yesterday morning. He knows what Cersei Lannister does to problems she cannot openly address. He has watched her manage them for years. He knows she is already thinking about how to manage him. He opens his diary. He has kept this diary for 32 years. Since the year he was raised to his current office, his handwriting has grown slightly smaller over the decades. His entries longer, his style more elaborate than strict necessity requires. He reads back through the most recent pages. The arrangements made before the trial, the terms as he recorded them. Eddard Stark would confess to treason. Eddard Stark would take the black. Eddard Stark would live. He wrote those terms down because he understood, when he agreed to lend the faith's blessing to the proceeding, that he was agreeing to something with his name on it. He put his name on the arrangement. He believed the arrangement would hold. He reads further back. There are entries about wars he blessed and lords he received in this same room, and prayers he said on behalf of causes he did not ask difficult questions about. 3 kings. several coronations. A great many things done in the name of the Seven, by men whose motives he did not examine closely, because examining them closely was never a requirement of his position. He has spent 32 years as a man who gives religious cover to whoever holds the Red Keep, and he has done it with the comfortable self-assurance of a man who has decided that the faith's stability is more important than the faith's discomfort. He is not a brave man. He has never claimed to be a brave man. He is a fat, pompous man who was promised something in the name of the Seven and watched the promise broken on holy ground in front of the whole city, and the whole city saw him raise his hand in response. That is the thing he cannot take back. He raised his hand. He invoked the sanctuary. The city saw it. Wes. A man who raises his hand in defense of something becomes, whether he wishes to or not, a man who is defending that thing, and the thing he is now defending is the integrity of the faith's own records and the life of a Lord who should not be dead. He picks up his pen and opens his diary to a fresh page and begins to write. He writes the date and the location. He writes the name of the proceeding and the hour it began. Poor. He writes the full sequence of what he witnessed, the crowd assembled on the plaza, the prisoner brought to the steps in chains, the reading of his own diary's earlier entries by the junior Septon with the carrying voice, the reading of the second volume, Maynard's journal, the crowd's response, his invocation of sanctuary, the words he spoke when he invoked it, and the confrontation that followed. He records Joffrey's expression when the reading began. He records what Cersei did with her hand when she needed her son to be quiet. He records the withdrawal of the prisoner back into custody and the state of the crowd when the platform cleared. He is thorough in the way that pompous men are, thorough exhaustively, with attention to details that may not matter, on the theory that a record is only valuable when it is complete. He writes it all down. A High Septon's authenticated diary recording events he witnessed on sacred ground is not a document that can be easily disputed. He is the highest religious authority in Westeros. What he writes about what he saw on the steps of the great Sept of Baelor carries the weight of the faith's own record. He understands this. He has always understood this. He has simply never used it for anything that cost him anything before. He is still writing when the messenger from Cersei arrives. It comes past midnight, a knock at the outer door, a quiet exchange with the junior Septon standing guard. And then the junior Septon brings him a sealed letter. The seal is not a crown. Cersei is too careful for a crown on a letter sent to a High Septon in the middle of the night after a day like this one. The wax is plain, and the address is warm, and the letter's contents are specific in the way that threats wrapped in courtesy are specific. The faith should give careful thought to whether this dispute, however it has arisen, is truly worth the weight of the Queen Regent's displeasure. The language is the language of a woman who knows she cannot yet act directly and is making sure he knows that the restriction is temporary. He reads it twice. He sets it on the table next to his diary. He picks up his pen. He writes the time the letter arrived. He describes it in full, its seal, its paper, its address, its contents, as specifically as a man can describe a document he holds in his hand. He writes the name of the junior Septon who brought it, and the account the outer guard gave of the messenger's arrival. He writes that he received this communication from the Queen Regent's household in the night, following the events at the Great Sept. He notes that he is recording it for the faith's permanent record. Then he calls for 3 junior Septons, waking them at whatever hour this is, and he gives each of them a copy of the diary's newest entries, copies he has been making in the margins of his writing session, in the careful hand he uses when he knows the document matters. Different locations, sealed, instructions not to open them unless he personally gives the word, or unless something happens to him. He watches them carry the copies out of the room. He sits back down. The sept bells ring for the morning before he moves again. He is tired. His back aches from a night in a chair built more for ceremony than extended use. He is still frightened. He is still a fat old man in a private robe, in a room that is colder than it was when the night began. He has spent 32 years being exactly as useful to powerful people as those people required. Tonight, he has done something that a man of his habits does rarely, and usually by accident. He has created a record that serves only the truth, and he has put it in enough hands that he himself cannot take it back, even if he wants to. He sits in the grey light of early morning and listens to the bells, and does not feel entirely like himself. 2 days after the reading on the Sept steps, Cersei Lannister makes her decision at the breakfast table, before anyone brings her the morning's reports. The journal is a forgery. Pycelle has his formal Citadel challenge written and sealed, ready to be delivered by midday. The trial will resume. Ned Stark will confess in the correct way, on the correct steps, in front of the correct crowd, and then Eileen Payne will do the work the king's justice is for. The faith will accept it, because the faith has accepted every execution the crown has staged on those steps since the sept was built. One fat Septon having an attack of principle does not change the architecture of power in this city. She has given him 2 days to reconsider, and he has not reconsidered, and that is all the time she intends to offer. She dresses carefully. She wears gold and crimson. She does Joffrey the courtesy of telling him, rather than asking him, that they are returning to the great sept this morning. The crowd has grown. That is the first thing wrong with the day, and Cersei sees it the moment she steps down from the palanquin and looks at the plaza. 2 days ago the crowd was large. Today it is larger, not because King's Landing has gained new residents in the interval, but because word of what happened on these steps has traveled the way dramatic things travel in a city built on gossip and shared misery. The people packed into the plaza are not the same crowd that came 2 days ago to watch a traitor confess. These people came for something else, some expectation they cannot name clearly but feel very specifically. And they are standing closer together than they stood before, the way crowds stand when they are there for a reason and not simply to watch. Joffrey does not register this. He is 13 years old, and he has been waiting 2 days to finish something, and now he is going to finish it. The High Septon stands in the doorway of the Great Sept. Not on the steps, not on the platform, in the doorway itself, where the stone beneath his feet belongs to the interior of the building and is consecrated ground in the full sense of the faith's law. He is squat and ponderously fat, and his grey hair sits under the crystals of his office, and he stands there, with his hands folded and his diary tucked under one arm, and he has the look of a man who has decided something and is not going to undecide it. The great doors are open behind him. He is framed by them. He watches the procession approach from the plaza without moving. Joffrey climbs the outer steps to the platform and stops 10 steps below the doorway. He stares up at the High Septon. He is a king, and he is 13 years old, and he knows what a king looks like in a moment like this one. He raises his chin. He points at the High Septon, and then at the platform stones below, and he says, "Bring him down from there. Then bring the prisoner out." The king's guard in their white cloaks move toward the sept doors. The small folk of King's Landing have been hungry for months. The food shortages that have been building since the autumn have not stopped building. The prices at the market stalls keep rising, and the bread keeps coming in short supply. And a hungry city is a city that has been looking for something to be angry about, something specific and large enough to hold all of it. Today it has found one, armed men in white cloaks climbing the sacred steps of the great sept of Baelor toward the highest religious figure in all of Westeros, who is standing in the doorway of the holiest building in the realm that people in this city have been told their whole lives. The sound that comes from the crowd is not the sound of a crowd cheering. It is not even the sound of a crowd booing. It is the sound a crowd makes when it witnesses something being done in front of it that it never consented to see, and when it begins to understand that it is large enough to matter. The sound shifts, the bodies shift with it. Arya Stark sees the white cloaks move. She is 10 years old and small and dark-haired, and she has been standing near the base of the statue of Baelor the Blessed since before the platform filled, the same spot she found 2 days ago, where the press of bodies offers some concealment and the sightlines to the platform are clear. She is not thinking about concealment right now. She is thinking about the Kingsguard climbing toward the High Septon, and about her father somewhere in a cell in the Red Keep, and about Needle, which is in her coat, and about what her father's face looked like 2 days ago on those steps. She starts forward. A hand closes around her arm. It is a large hand and rough, and it closes with the grip of a man who is used to holding things that want to go somewhere. He is not going to let them go. The man is a Night's Watch recruiter named Yoren, who has been somewhere in this crowd since before the platform filled, and who located her in it before she located him. He does not say anything. He holds on. He tightens it without shifting his weight or raising his voice or doing anything that would draw attention from the people standing around them. She pulls again, and he holds, and she stops, because she has enough of her father's sense left in her to understand that her name shouted in this crowd would bring the wrong kind of help. The Kingsguard stops moving. They stop, not because Joffrey has changed his order. He has not. He is still pointing. His face is flushing with the specific color it turns when he wants something he's not getting, but because the crowd between them and the doorway has closed. It has done this the way water fills a space. Not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily, body by body, until the path to the High Septon is a path through hundreds of King's Landing small folk who have positioned themselves, consciously or not. Cutting through them to reach the consecrated stone is not a military maneuver. It is a massacre, on sacred ground, in front of every person in the city who will still be alive tomorrow to describe what they saw. The Kingsguard captain looks at the crowd, then he looks at the platform. Joffrey's face goes still, and then red, and then very still again. Cersei puts her hand on his arm. She speaks close to his ear, and the words she says are the same words she said 2 days ago at this same moment on this same platform. "Not here," she tells him. "Not now." She says it quietly, not because she is uncertain, but because the less the crowd hears of what is said between them, the better. Joffrey's jaw tightens. He does not speak. He does not move her hand away. The Kingsguard withdraws from the steps. They come down in good order, the way trained men come down from a position they are leaving by choice rather than being driven from, and the crowd parts for them and closes again behind them. And the noise it makes while all of this is happening is a low, continuous sound that does not rise into shouting. It just continues. It fills the plaza and spreads down the surrounding streets and goes on after the Kingsguard has returned to the platform and Ned Stark is still in his cell and the High Septon has not moved from the doorway. The standoff holds. Petyr Baelish watches all of it from near the edge of the platform. He watches the crowd's noise continue after the Kingsguard withdraws. He watches Cersei's hand on Joffrey's arm and the angle of Joffrey's face. He watches the High Septon in the doorway unmoving, still holding his diary. He has spent a long career building structures that appear solid from the outside, while something quieter and more decisive is happening beneath the surface. He knows what a structure looks like when it starts to give. What he is watching right now? Cersei managing the crowd and the king simultaneously, succeeding at neither, fully losing ground on both, is not the collapse of Lannister power in King's Landing. Not yet. It is the moment when the crack becomes visible. In his experience, cracks do not stay where they start. The raven from King's Landing reaches Robb Stark's camp in the Riverlands, carrying a single word in a hand that is close enough to Ned Stark's to have been written at his instruction, "Hold." Robb reads it once, then he reads it again. He is 16 years old, and he has 20,000 men behind him, and a father who is alive in a cell, and the instruction is a single word that does not explain itself. Hold while what? Hold until when? Hold in their current position, which is a position of strength that grows less useful the longer it sits unexploited. He shows the message to Catelyn. She reads it differently, not with confusion, but with the attention of a woman who has been thinking about leverage since the first raven arrived, and who recognizes the gap between what a message says and what it means. She knows what hold means. It means Ned is alive and thinking. It also means he needs time, and time is what the army is burning through, while it sits in the Riverlands eating through its provisions and waiting for a war that has not been fought. They have the army, which is the most immediate pressure. They have the knowledge of the journal's contents, which every raven out of King's Landing is spreading to every lord in the realm, whether Cersei wants it or not. And they have Tyrion Lannister in a tent, which is a hostage that grows more valuable by the hour, as the Lannister position in King's Landing grows more precarious. Push south, she says, not with swords, but with terms. They have the leverage. Use it before the Lannisters find something to stabilize their footing. Robb is quiet for a long time. His father said, "Hold." He is going to hold, and he is going to send a raven back that asks the question his father's message did not answer. He writes it in the short way that ravens require. What are the terms? He seals it and sends it, and then goes to find Tyrion. Tyrion Lannister is brought out of his tent cell that afternoon, not the cart he rode in from the Vale region, which afforded him very little dignity, but the canvas enclosure he has occupied since the camp settled, which affords him somewhat more. He comes out blinking in the afternoon light, with the expression of a man who has been thinking hard with only his own reasoning for company, and has arrived at some conclusions he would like to test against new information. Catelyn sits across from him at the camp table and tells him everything. She does it plainly, the way she always does things she finds unpleasant, directly, without softening, watching his face while she speaks. The reading on the Sept steps, his sister's sworn promise of mercy, recorded in the High Septon's own authenticated diary and read aloud, before thousands of the city's people, the annulment of Rhaegar Targaryen's first marriage, the secret wedding to a woman named Lyanna Stark, performed by the High Septon himself in Dorne. The current High Septon, standing in his doorway with his diary under his arm, and no intention of moving. The Northern Army in the Riverlands with the journal's contents as its mandate, and Tyrion Lannister in its camp as its collateral. Tyrion listens through all of it without speaking. He is a dwarf with mismatched eyes, one green and one black, and half the golden hair his sister was given, and considerably more of the wit she was not given credit for either. And he sits very still through the full account in the way he goes still when he is processing something very quickly and does not want to be interrupted while he does it. When she finishes, a silence holds for a moment. Then he says his family has just lost everything. He would very much like to help negotiate the deal that lets him survive it. He is clever enough to see the thing his sister cannot see from inside the position she is managing. The journal is out and cannot be unread. The question is not whether Joffrey's claim to the throne has been destroyed. It has been. And Pycelle's formal citadel challenge will not repair it, because a maester's administrative letter does not carry more weight than the faith's own head, standing on holy ground, authenticating a record from his predecessor's hand. The question is, what arrangement allows the maximum number of surviving players to come away from this month with something worth having? The Starks have the army and Tyrion in their camp. The Lannisters have Sansa Stark in their custody, and Ned Stark in their cells. The High Septon has the sept, the journal, and sealed copies of his diary distributed to locations Cersei cannot reach without making the situation considerably worse than it already is. No one of these has enough to force an outcome alone. The arrangement that ends this is one in which all of them have less than they want and more than they deserve, which is what settlements look like when they work. And Ned, alive and at the wall, confirming the journal by surviving, not by speaking, is the only version of this that allows Cersei to claim she has not entirely lost. Ned dead is a martyr with the faith's own seal on his cause, and a living Targaryen heir at the wall that every lord in the realm will start calculating about before the body is cold. Alive, gone north, and sworn to a life of silence, Ned becomes a story. Stories are manageable, martyrs are not. The terms Robb's next raven carries south are simple enough to fit in a short message: Ned's release, an end to the northern army's advance in exchange for acknowledgement that the journal's contents are not officially contested by the crown, not recognition of a Targaryen heir, not abdication, not apology or accounting or justice for anything done. Simply, the crown does not publicly call the High Septon a liar. The document stands as a faith record. Everything else is deferred. The raven reaches the small council before the morning is out. Cersei reads the message. Her face does not change. She sets it on the table in front of her and calls for Littlefinger. He arrives from wherever Littlefinger arrives from, which is never entirely clear. And he stands across the table, and she puts the message in front of him and asks him the question she already knows the answer to, because she needs to hear it from someone who will not soften it for her benefit. He takes a breath. Then he gives her the honest answer, which he gives her only when being honest costs him less than the alternative. No, he says. Ned Stark dead is a martyr for every lord who resents Lannister rule, and now has a faith document providing religious cover for that resentment. Every one of those lords will display the faith's record in their great hall and point at it and name it as the reason they are justified in whatever they do next. Ned Stark alive and at the wall is a man who has spoken his Night's Watch oath, which is permanent and which prevents him from pressing any political claim, confirming any succession, or doing anything at all except guarding a 700-foot stretch of ice until he dies. He is the most dangerous man in Westeros if he is executed here. He is nearly harmless if he goes north and swears his life away on the wall. She hates this. She understands it. Both things are fully true, and she sits with both of them. She calls for Varys. Varys delivers the terms to the High Septon that evening in the Sept's private chambers. In the quiet way, Varys delivers things that need to arrive without extra witnesses. He is plump and bald and pale in his fine robes, and he states the offer briefly, with the manner of a man who already knows the person receiving it has worked most of it out alone. Ned Stark will be released to the Night's Watch under the original deal's terms. Confession, the Black, the War, no lands, no claim, no title, no political power, and the permanent silence of a man who has sworn to wear no crowns and win no glory. The Night's Watch oath is for life, and they both understand what it binds. The document will not be officially contested. Not while the High Septon still holds the copies he has placed beyond the crown's reach, and not while the city still carries what it heard on the steps of the Great Sept 3 days ago. The High Septon looks at Varys for a long time. He is a fat man who spent 32 years giving religious cover to whatever the powerful required, and who did one honest thing at the end of it and built a wall of paper around himself to survive the doing of it. He knows this is the best outcome available to a man in his position. He nods. The deal is made. Ned Stark is brought out of the black cells on the morning of the 8th day after the reading on the Sept steps, and he looks the way a man looks who has spent weeks underground, thin in the face, the grey advancing in his beard, the eyes adjusting to the light with the slow care of someone who has not had much of it. His hands hang without chains. The guards who escort him to the courtyard have stopped being guards, in any practical sense, and all of them understand this without it needing to be said. Varys is waiting for him in the yard. He states the terms quietly and with precision. Ned takes the black, he joins the Night's Watch formally, the oath, the wall, the life sworn to it. He holds no lands and no titles. He claims nothing. He presses no succession questions on behalf of anyone. He wears no crowns and wins no glory. The Night's Watch vow is permanent, which is the part that matters to Cersei. A man who has formally sworn before witnesses cannot confirm a Targaryen heir's rights or advance any political claim. She is not wrong about this. The vow is the seal on the deal, and both of them understand it. Ned says, bring him to Sansa first. They bring Sansa to the Red Keep's yard. She comes across the stones at a half-run, which is the fastest she allows herself, in front of the Lannister guards flanking her, and she is 13 years old, and her eyes are already red. She reaches him, and holds on, and he pulls her close, and lowers his face to her auburn hair, and says something quiet that belongs only to her, something the yard walls do not carry further than the two of them. She shakes. He holds her, and does not let go until the guards make clear, gently and then less gently, that the moment is over. Then she is taken back. The terms are not generous enough to free her today. She is still a piece of the arrangement, still a hostage in a game that is not fully resolved, and when the guards move her back toward the keep, she does not resist, because she has learned in the hardest school available what resisting Lannisters in their own halls costs. She looks back at him once from the doorway. He watches her go. He watches until the door closes and there is nothing left to watch. He has one last thing to do in this city. He walks to the Great Sept of Baelor. The steps are empty today. The crowd that gathered twice, once to watch him confess and once to watch the Kingsguard fail to reach the High Septon, has dispersed back to the ordinary life of King's Landing. The stones of the steps are clean, no blood on them. No blood was shed here, and in the faith's accounting that matters, the sanctuary held, and the stepstones carry no stain. He is squat and fat and grey-haired, and he receives Ned's thanks with the awkward dignity of a man who is not certain he deserves what he is being given, but has decided to accept it anyway, because the alternative is to wave it away, and that would be a different kind of undignified. He gives Ned a sealed copy of his diary, the full record updated through Cersei's nighttime messenger and everything that followed, documented in the High Septon's meticulous and long-winded hand. What was sworn, what was read, what was done on these steps. Ned takes it and puts it inside his coat. Then a junior Septon brings ice. The sword comes wrapped in plain cloth, but the shape is unmistakable. A Valyrian steel greatsword, the sword of House Stark, the sword that was supposed to take his head on this ground. Its weight is familiar, in a way that goes past the body. into the part of a person that holds everything they were raised to be. Ned takes it. He stands on the steps of the great sept of Byalore, with the sword of his house in his hands, and looks at the city one last time, the rooftops, the smoke, the distant shimmer of the harbor. Then he turns north. He carries ice with him. He carries it home. At Castle Black, a fuller raven arrives. Jon Snow reads it standing at the tower window with his back to the room. The scroll unrolled in both hands, the wall visible over his shoulder through the narrow stone frame. This message is not like the ones before. This one is complete. His father is alive and has agreed to terms and is coming north to take the Black. The deal is done. The document stands. And there is a name in the message, near the end, that Jon has to read 3 times before he lets himself understand that it applies to him. Aegon Targaryen. Legitimate son of Rhaegar Targaryen, Crown Prince of the Seven Kingdoms, and Lyanna Stark of Winterfell, the product of a marriage performed by the faith's highest authority in the year of Robert's rebellion. Heir to the Iron Throne by the laws of succession and a dead man's meticulous journal. He looks at the message. He looks at the wall, 700 feet of ancient ice, blue-white in the morning light, older than anyone alive, and built for a purpose that has nothing to do with thrones. He is 16 years old. He took his vows in a godswood in the dark, and he meant every word. I shall take no wife, hold no lands, father no children. I shall wear no crowns and win no glory. I shall live and die at my post. His name is Jon Snow. He grew up as Jon Snow, came north as Jon Snow, knelt in the godswood as Jon Snow, and gave away the future he might have had in exchange for this wall and this post and this watch that will not end until his death. And also his name is Aegon Targaryen. He is the son of the woman who made Ned Stark keep a secret for 16 years, at the cost of everything that cost matters. He is the reason for the silence that was not silence but sacrifice. He folds the message. He goes back to his post. His vows are both his protection and his prison, and for now he cannot tell which is heavier, and he does not try to calculate it. He is the sword in the darkness. He is the watcher on the walls. He goes back to his post. In the Riverlands, a raven reaches Robb's camp before midday. Robb reads it. He hands it to Catelyn without speaking. She reads it the way she has read all the ravens that carried the news that mattered, quietly, twice, her face holding the expression she wears when she is managing something that is trying to reach her features. The terms are accepted. Ned is released. He is going to the wall. He will not come home to Winterfell. Catelyn knows the Night's Watch oath. She has known it since before she was old enough to know what it cost. It is for life and permanent, and it does not come with exceptions for men who took it under duress or under the pressure of a deal made on the steps of a sept in the capital. Her husband is alive and going to keep living, and she knows exactly where he will be, at the wall in the cold, alive, and she will never sit across a fire from him again in Winterfell. He will be alive and unreachable, which is a different kind of loss from death, the kind that does not have a name because no one built a word for it. She does not show this to Robb. She tells him, "Stand down the army." He does. The northern host turns north and begins its long march home. Tyrion Lannister is released from the camp that same day and rides south with a small escort that is courteous in the way people are courteous towards someone they no longer have reason to detain. He is 26 years old, and he is alive, and he is heading back to a city and a family that have both lost something they cannot quite name. He will arrive to find King's Landing quieter than it was. He will become acting hand. He will do what he always does with a broken situation, look for the load-bearing pieces and figure out which ones he can hold. He does not know yet whether this will be enough. He never knows. He rides south anyway. Ned Stark rides north. He is not the hand of the king. He is not the lord of Winterfell. He is a man of the Night's Watch, sworn and travelling to where sworn men go, and the road in front of him is the King's Road north, and then the King's Road beyond, and then the Cold, and then the Wall. He rides with a small escort. Not Stark bannermen, not soldiers, just a handful of men whose job ends when they deliver him to the next way station. He carries ice on his back, wrapped in plain cloth, the weight of it familiar in a way that has nothing to do with the muscle that holds it. He carries the sealed copy of the High Septon's diary inside his coat. He rides through the autumn, and the air sharpens with every day, and the sky goes wider and emptier the further north he gets from everything that tried to kill him. Behind him, the city rebalances itself. Cersei Lannister stands in the throne room of the Red Keep and looks at the Iron Throne. It is still hers. Joffrey sits it, golden-haired and green-eyed and 13 years old, a king who has now learned in front of the whole city that there are things he cannot simply order into happening. The throne is real, and the grip on it is real, and the Lannister name still carries the weight of armies and gold and fear. But Stannis Baratheon's letters have reached every lord in the realm, and every one of those letters is now more credible than it was a fortnight ago. Stannis said Joffrey was a bastard born of incest and had no right to the throne. The faith's own record, authenticated by the sitting High Septon, says the legitimate heir to the Targaryen line is alive and at the wall with vows on him. The regime is intact. It holds. But it holds differently than it held before, the way a wall holds after you have found the crack and cannot unfire it. Littlefinger watches all of this from a step behind, as he has always watched, with the patient attention of a man who is never quite in the middle of a situation, but never quite outside it either. He has not lost anything permanent. He has lost a specific move. The Stark-Lannister war he had been managing and shaping and feeding like a fire he kept lit, and he has lost it because something larger arrived and consumed it before he could contain it. A larger fire is not a problem for Littlefinger. It is an opportunity in a different shape. He turns the new board over in his mind and counts the pieces. A Targaryen heir at the wall, with vows that prevent him from pressing any claim, but do not prevent others from pressing it on his behalf. A young wolf heading home with an army that never fought, which means it is still whole. A queen regent whose position is weakened and who has just been forced to accept a settlement she hated, and himself, still trusted by everyone, answerable to no one, standing on a ladder that does not care what the rungs are made of. The chaos is still a ladder. It has always been a ladder. He has always been good at climbing. The gate of Castle Black opens on a grey morning near the end of autumn. Jon Snow is on duty at the gate when the riders come through. He has been awake since before first light, in the way that men are awake when they are waiting for something they have been told is coming, but cannot fully believe will arrive. He watches the riders come through, one by one. He watches until the man at the front of the group passes beneath the gate, and then he stops watching the group and looks only at the man. He is lean, dark-haired, with grey eyes in a long face, and the careful look of someone who has spent time in the dark and is still getting used to the light. He is thinner than Jon remembers. He is wearing no lord's clothes and no lord's chain. He carries a wrapped sword on his back that Jon knows by its shape even through the cloth, because there are some shapes you know before you think about knowing them. Jon looks at his father. Ned looks at his son. Neither of them speaks for a moment. Neither of them says the name. The name is somewhere in a vault to the south, in the careful handwriting of a dead man, and it can wait a little longer. They look at each other. It is enough, for now, just to look. Ned takes his night's watch vows formally the next morning, at the wall, at the base of it where the ice rises and the world ends. The wall that Brandon the builder raised out of ice and magic, and the ancient purpose of keeping what comes from the north on the north side of it, stands 700 feet above them. And Ned kneels on the frozen ground and speaks the words in the voice he has always used for things that matter. Night gathers, and now my watch begins. It shall not end until my death. I shall take no wife, hold no lands, father no children. I shall wear no crowns and win no glory. I shall live and die at my post. I am the sword in the darkness. I am the watcher on the walls. I pledge my life and honor to the night's watch, for this night and all the nights to come. John stands among the black brothers in the yard. His own vows are 12 days older. He knows the words by feel. Now the way you know something you mean. They go up to the top of the wall the following evening, when the watch changes and gives them an hour before, the cold becomes unreasonable. There is a lift for going up, a creaking wooden platform that rises slowly and leaves your stomach somewhere below it. And then you are at the top, and the world is different. At the top, the south is behind you, distant. The north is in front of you, dark and wide and patient, stretching past everything the eye can follow, into the long black cold of whatever lies beyond. The wall is 700 feet of old ice beneath your boots, and it does not care about thrones or journals or the names of dead princes. John asks the question. He has been holding it for a long time, long enough that he does not know exactly when it became a question. He was waiting to ask, rather than one he had simply given up on. My mother, he says. Who was she? Ned looks at him. He looks at the dark hair that should have been silver if the blood had run differently, that should have marked him as what he is, instead of letting him pass as something else for 16 years. He looks at the grey eyes that should have been violet, the long face that looks like his own, and also like someone else at an angle John has never seen, and Ned will never forget. Someone who carried a harp and a sadness that turned into songs. Someone whose name men have been saying out loud again for the first time in 16 years, saying it in halls and markets and on the steps of a sept, saying it like something they thought was finished. He made her a promise in a tower in dawn while she was dying and the world was ending. He kept that promise badly at first, with a lie he told in shame, and then kept it well for a long time, at the cost of everything a man pays who chooses silence over his own honor. And the promise has been spoken aloud now, on the steps of a great sept before more witnesses than he can count, by a dead man's journal. And the boy is here. The boy is alive, standing on the wall with his vows on him, a sword in the darkness, a watcher on the walls, safe in the only way safety ever comes. Not by hiding, but by being exactly where he is meant to be. He tells him everything. The cold wind comes off the ice and moves between them, and the north stretches out beyond the edge of the world. Below them, the realm does what it always does. It churns and plots and calculates, and the north watches from its long cold border and waits. Winter is coming. It has always been coming. It will keep coming long after everything that happened on these steps has become a story. Men argue about in firelit halls. That's our theory. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey, then please like, share,